Yes, Sandra, of course. We have two questions here. And we have one question from Henrique Ramalho. He didn't tell to which of the speakers was, so I just read it. How does the transformative education perspective deal with the hegemonic preponderance of instrumental education devoted to the market values of the neoliberal social and cultural standard?
Põe a questão no chat.
O meu rato morreu.
Okay, who wants to?
I will copy again the question and put on the chat because we just lost.
Pergunta quem é que quer começar.
Feel free to answer. Who wants to go first?
Well, maybe I'll jump in. I just think it really appreciated everyone's contributions, and if I didn't say it already because I got kicked out and disoriented and came back. Muito obrigada pelo convite. Thanks so much for the invitation. I think what's been interesting listening to all the different inputs here is that there's different audiences and different slices of the work to do, I think, that each one of us is speaking to. So Marta and I have focused quite strongly in our contributions to talking to teachers in Northern European classrooms. And I think, you know, I was saying in my talk, like that is an already extremely constrained context. And I share some of Renee's pessimism with just how far we can get in those contexts. But as Marta was saying, actually doing that collaborative work, it sounds very cheesy, but it's re-inspired me as to the importance of that, because, you know, I spent a lot, and we spent a lot of time theorizing, but when you're actually sitting in these classrooms and seeing what's happening and seeing the students responding to a more reflexive and transformative approach, actually, sometimes the constraints, I'm not saying they go away, but there are spaces created. So an interesting and unexpected outcome of our study was we were working with teachers in Finland, England, and Sweden. And actually we thought that the teachers in England were going to have the most difficult time taking up Heads Up because they are in an extremely highly intense exam culture. But they were the most subversive. They did the coolest things in their classrooms. They found ways within that exam culture to actually do some, I would say, some transformative learning. So anyways, that's just a piece reflecting on our contribution.
I can follow this, Argy. I think we need to personalize a good part of the curriculum and educational impacts based on social and economic context. I'm not saying that we have different learning objectives, but rather understand that the context is part of the elements that condition learning. Not everyone comes to school with the same backpack. I know many environments, especially in Spain and Latin America, in which students learn a curriculum that ignores their condition of origin or their specific life conditions. The school transfers knowledge, but the ultimate goal is transformation, not retention of the data or mechanical instructions.
Sandra, may I continue?
Yeah. Perfect, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think that the subject of different contexts really shouldn't be underestimated here. And, you know, a lot in a way has to do with pedagogical courage and possibility of the person who's either a teacher or a facilitator or a professor and so on. And I think, for instance, there's a big difference between, let's say, if we're just talking on the level of higher education, the one which is, let's say, privately funded, which is what pretty much most of North America is, the one that's publicly funded, which is like most of the Europe, And the difference is that you have students that are seen either as customers and clients or as students that are still kind of seen as students. So for instance, here in the North American context, in the Canadian context, what you would see is that when difficult subjects are brought up, such as the conversations about racism, colonialism, all these kind of things, you would get active resistance from students to even talk about these subjects because they feel personally challenged, especially the ones that come from highly privileged background. And this can be dangerous for professors, right? So there has to be consideration of that as well. We cannot automatically assume that in all contexts, these are welcomed subjects. They're not. Now, on the other hand, of course, schools are also not closed entities. Teachers are often perceived as having strict curricula that they have to follow, but in the end of the day, in the classroom, it's them and the kids. And having and instilling in them the courage to be brave in these educational settings, I think it's very important. There's a lot that can be done, like Karen was saying, but we have to really be very mindful in what context, so that it's safe for everybody involved, but also brave. And knowing how to push this line, how to walk this thread, is not an easy task, basically.
Okay, Nuno, do you have more?
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Yes, we have one more question here. I will put also on the chat. It was from Tanya Diaz. What is the role of higher education preparing / educating professionals to deal with climate and questioning the colonial systems of power? Easy question.
Well, I would say that it's down really to initial teacher education. ITE is what we call it here. It's how, I think, to a large extent, how teachers are trained, and the curriculum under which their practice is developed. And unfortunately, one of the outcomes of the last 12, 13 years of austerity is that the development education sector here has lost a lot of its capacity. And there's very little being done in terms of ITE here at the moment. So I think that's really a crucial aspect of this question. How do we ensure that teachers who are going through colleges and universities and learning their practice are exposed to these issues? Issues of global justice, neoliberalism, globalization, gender justice, and so on. And not enough of it is happening at the moment. And of course, more training when they actually get out into the classroom as well.
So if I may, I have two questions now, because one of Pepe, you were mentioning how is going to be education after the storm passes, and I would ask you, how is going to be education if the storm doesn't pass? Because I don't think that the storm is going away. This is just a small wave. We are the tsunami is yet to come, and it's not only one tsunami. It's going to be several tsunamis. And at the same time, Stephen, for you, I really enjoyed your comment on the Sustainable Development Goals, because I was in the morning in a webinar about water, and Sustainable Development Goal 6 is related to water. And I had to ask to the person that was talking, how can we make it compatible, water as a human right, and at the same time, something with economical value? And René, of course, under this model of economic growth, we are in the Harvard School of Economics nowadays, and under this model of economy with where everything is a commodity, water as a commodity, I think this is very fun, because we are happily walking through our extinction and the human extinction, actually, which is going to be good for the rest of nature, of course. But what do you think is going to be the role of education in all this context of not one storm that is going away? This is just the first wave. And Stefan, how do you think that these sustainable development goals that I think are quite cynical are going to help us? And René, under this economic model, that it's not going to go away with the objective of infinite growth on a finite planet? I mean, it looks like an unsolvable equation.
It's no easy to answer. It's not our book. It's about 20 books as we wrote. Yeah, I think one of the for me one of the nuclear question in this question is about adaptation or interpretation of the curriculum. I think the teachers now are designers of context of learning. I think that it's very important to do questions for students that obligate the students to explore, to share, to identify the keys of the same history because as some speakers said, we receive a history. For example, one of the most recent examples is the history, the paper, the role of the woman in the science history. This is one of the projects that in the Horizon 2020 project in Jesuit schools we make in about 8 years ago to the secondary students. What is the role of the woman in the history of science, but in the history of arts, in the of literature, in some, but especially in the science. This is one way to put the question of thinking about if the history that we receive is the objective history, is the real history. And I think sometimes this question, for example, was a question born in the girl students, because the girls said, we are not in the history, but now we know that some women are out of the history, but not in the real experience, only in the books or in literature, signed with as a man to not have no problems. And I think one of the ways is if I receive a curriculum, and I am a teacher like a machine, that I have mechanical lessons, mechanical transference. This is for me the wrong way. And really, one of the ways is to know the students, to know the social economic environments, to know as a critical viewer our own history, our own paper in the world, and to invite the students to explore, to share, and to deep in these questions.
If I may respond also a bit to Nuno's question, I think that especially in terms of the sustainability conversations, we are dealing with audiences and contexts that are very different, and people feel very differently about where we are on this curve of collapse of things, right? So there's some that feel, okay, climate change is not even real. It's a natural cycle. It's not human influenced. There's nothing to be done about it. So complete denial. And you have those that say, okay, climate change is human induced, but we'll manage this. And you have those that say we're in a state of climate urgency or climate crisis, which is we are reaching a tipping point where we are beginning to seriously compromise our chances of survival. And then you have those that say tipping point has already passed. Now, we don't really know where we are on this curve, but depending on where we feel we are on this curve, we will behave and act and think very differently. But I think what it's important, it's at least to have a conversation that this curve does exist. And if we situate ourselves wrongly compared to the reality of what's happening, our responses are not going to be corresponding to the reality of the world in which we are, because our analysis is basically off. Now, if this is true, that potentially we have passed the ecological tipping points, and there are several indicators that would suggest why this may be the case, not just in terms of climate change, but also in terms of the depletion of renewable and non-renewable resources and so on, then we really should be preparing for life on a very different planet than the one we are currently used to. A world that's on average 3 or 5 degrees warmer, which may happen by the end of the century, it's not the Earth that we know, literally. So what does then that mean? And even if there's 1% chance that this is a future reality, if we are not taking that into the consideration, we are not getting ready. Because the keeping of what we have will reach the biophysical limits of the planet. It's just a question of when, right? But then again, if education is only about keeping our generation alive and going through, well, we can probably still play the self-centered card for a few decades, but it's not gonna go on for the future generations. This is literally compromising humanity's chances of survival. And like you've said, Nuno, other species will be fine. Probably better off, but for the humans, that's a different question.
You were asking about SDG 6, I think, the one in regard to water. I think just in terms of the SDGs overall, I think the big problem with them is that there's a contradiction at the heart of them between those SDGs that are calling for growth and those SDGs that are calling for the protection of the natural environment. So goal 8, for example, is calling on the least developed countries to achieve 7% GDP increase by 2030. So you have to ask yourself, how is that commensurate with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average as called for in the Paris Climate Change Agreement? They're completely contradictory positions. And the reason for that is because the model of development that underpins the goals is the same pro-growth model of development that's created the climate crisis. So that's why I think you do need to look at the systemic aspect of this debate, as well as what we can do as individuals and educators, because whether we like it or not, the SDGs represent the main form of development policy architecture at the moment. And a lot of NGOs and civil society movements around the world are basing their practice on them. So I think that means we have to critically interrogate them. And from what I'm seeing in our sector, we're not doing that. From what I've been told, we need to bring carbon emissions down to 0 by 2050. Otherwise, we go past that tipping point that Rennie was talking about. So the clock is ticking, and the time for incremental action, the kind of action that's advocated by the goals, has long since passed. We need more radical approaches to address that. And I think there are lessons to be learned from the pandemic and how we do that, but that's probably a conversation for another time.
I don't know if any other speakers would like to add any Any comment about these questions from Nuno? And then we have another question in the chat.
I might just link the two quickly.
Okay, Karen.
If I can, I don't know, or link the way they're linking in my mind anyway. And to Stephen, let's see if I can do all of that. I never, but you know, as we were mentioning, one of the barriers that we came up against in the work with teachers is what we've been calling solutionism. And it's this idea that teacher, and I think it's tied to the same critique Stephen's making of the SDGs, but it's this idea that you have to have a consolation at the end of a lesson where you decide on a solution that everybody can take. Now, people push back against this because for the same reasons Stephen was saying, like there's action really that does need to be taken. But we've gotten so obsessed with making students feel good that they can come up with a solution. And then later they realize, they get very disillusioned when they realize the solution they came up to actually wasn't like, you know, and also the adults really are the ones who are responsible here for actually taking the strong solutions. So this question about, it ends with, you know, what do we do about this uncertainty in our post-colonial approaches, the answers alone? No, there's no one answer. Post-colonial approaches definitely are not going to solve all of our problems. However, as I was mentioning in my first contribution, we know, we see it, we're reproducing this over and over and over. So there does maintain a need to address coloniality's complicity with modernity for all of the reasons we've been talking about. But it's not like we just can find this specific set of answers that are gonna, you know, solve the whole problem. And I guess what I'm trying to call for is a reaction against this awareness raising campaign style approaches in schools that can happen at the same time, but we really need to be taking up these systemic issues, this relationality bit, the desires Renee is talking about. We need to reclaim classrooms to some extent as spaces for doing that work, as limited as they are.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was just going to quickly add to that point. I mean, I think I'm speaking with my NGO hat on, that I know that we can be part of the problem in schools because we tend to go into schools to fundraise and we reinforce this transactional idea about development. You know, development can be solved by making donations, and that undermines genuine activism, and it undermines the kind of complex knowledges that we need to try and really understand international development and poverty eradication and all of these issues. So one of the things we're trying to encourage NGOs to do is to think carefully about how you engage with schools and how you engage with young people to help them unlearn the charity mentality that seems to be very prevalent in our school community, at least here anyway. It's a big problem.
Sorry, very
Thank you,
short.
Stephen.
I think some of these questions, I think it's very important to give strong arguments in reviewing what is going on. I think sometimes for students, the reflection about climate change or immigration are not in the focus of a strong curricula, are apart. Are in the free time practically, no? Like extra school, and I think it's very important that all the knowledge, all the experience, all the exploration, sharing, have this main objective. Give strong arguments in reviewing what is going on. Strong arguments for me is very, very important.
Thank you, Pepe. Anyone would like to add something else? Oh, okay, we have just one more question in the chat. It's too long, but it's interesting, of course, and I will read it. And if you don't mind, you can comment. From Francisco Parrança. I would like to ask our invited speakers what are their thoughts about the role of global citizenship education for the future of education in a time when we can no longer predict with a certain level of confidence what kind of competences our future global citizens will need to do their part as constructors of a more sustainable world as we could do some decades ago, although it wasn't in our minds at that time. And since education works in the past, the present, but always looking for the future, how can we prepare ourselves and our students to deal with all the uncertainty, the multiple predictions made about humankind future at environmental, social, and political levels? A particular aspect that interests me, how to address growing inequalities in a global citizenship education perspective. Do you believe post-colonial approaches are the answers alone? Thank you so much, Francisco, and please feel free to comment. I don't know who would like to start. Pepe, Karen, Stephen, René, would you like to add something?
I thought I already tried that one.
Well, this is a long session, a very interesting one. We will finish it. We are in time.
Maybe I'll just add an addendum that.
But your thoughts are very interesting for us.
I think that I think we're facing a certain type of uncertainty, but uncertainty is not new, right? And maybe another way to look at it is we're unmasking a false certainty in a particular way. So I just think we have to be both, as René was saying, both cognizant of the real issue, like material impacts, for example, that COVID has had on people's lives. But, you know, it's not like the first time this has happened. I think it's more that the bigger systems are cracking, and the collective that René's linked to there. I know we sometimes talk about hospicing modernity, you know, and sort of seeing that. So if we think of the uncertainty, there's different ways to look at what the uncertainty means today, and to think of it in a relational and historical context. And I think that the question about post-colonial critique, I mean, I do think it remains essential from what I'm seeing in schools, because it is obvious that students, I mean, I have students at university who don't know what the word Indigenous means. Like, and they are really smart, excellent students that, you know, went through the English school system. So I do think it's extremely relevant. I think it helps pedagogically in really important ways if we believe in those transformative work we're doing. But no, it's not, of course not, there's no such thing as one kind of way of thinking as having all of the answers. Anyway, that's just hopefully helpful in some way.
Yes, for sure. It was helpful. Any other comments to this thought?
Very, very short. I think, as Karen said, a certain uncertainty is not new, but really is more complex, maybe, that another time. Yeah, and for me, the problem is a school that transfers mechanically or uncritically. For me, this is historically the school transfer memorization, knowledge, but the students eat the information, but not create critical thinking. Therefore, it's important that teachers prepare ourselves to go beyond our content and help interrelate knowledge. This is in that moment is going out or the personally speciality, and give a global vision. This for me is one of the way to training the new teachers, in the sense, not the new persons, The same teachers, but a personal transformation and renew the teacher.
Thank you so much, Pepe, for your insights. And anyone would like to add any comments?
I'll say something because I haven't said anything else. But I'm aware that our meeting is going to end in 8 minutes. So
Yes.
I'll be quick. I think just on the topic of uncertainty, just to say as well that this newfound concern with uncertainty that we have, it's a big privilege, and it's kind of a result of that, because a lot of people have, around the world, there's groups of people who have always had uncertainty at different extents and at different levels and for different reasons and all that kind of stuff. And now we've certainly have to, we're talking as if this is something new, and that's definitely an expression of a certain privilege, I think. And also, I just wanted to refer back as well to Renee's article, and the article you co-authored with Vanessa and Sharon about this shift from education for sustainable development to education for the end of the world as we know it, as you just mentioned, and the need to disinvest from this need to have certainty is, I think, is a big takeaway that I've taken from that reading. So I just wanted to say that.
So, any other comments? We have 7 minutes to finish.
If I can just continue from Marta.
We still have 1 more hour if you want to stay, because the meeting it only ends in 1 hour. No problem.
So
no, I actually have another Zoom to go to, but
yes, of course. We are finished. Yeah.
Maybe just in relation to what Marta was saying, and also Karen, I think that yes, uncertainty is a privilege. Like the feeling of feeling uncertain now is a privilege of a certain group of people. Many other groups have felt uncertain for a very long time. And it's also something that's probably temporarily fairly limited. It's not an experience that is like centuries old. It's something that was safeguarded for a group of people in the, let's say, late 20th century, early 21st, and so on. But it's our incapacity to deal with uncertainty is very much linked with our incapacity to deal with, I think, complexity in general. And perhaps one of the things that, or one of the methodologies that we use in the collective that might be useful for this is the idea of trying to imagine ourselves not as an individual, but as a bus of different passengers that live within our body. So that's something that at least can help us entertain the possibility of holding contradictive positions within ourselves, which is something that we usually don't consider. And this is what leads us to the idea of needing single solutions, single answers, single approaches, which are actually not more fit for this world if they ever were. So just that.
Thank you. Thank you, René. Thank you so much. And a final comment. We don't have for now any question, only some comments and some changing, some participants are changing ideas, and that is important for all of us. Well, I'm not sure if anyone would like to ask a question by micro. We have 5 minutes and I think that we will finish. Sandra, no?
Someone wants to ask a final question. There's still time.
No.
1 minute. Yeah.
It was really a pleasure to have all these participants. We had about 70 participants. Mm-hmm. Now we have less, of course, but it was very interesting to be with you, and we would like to thank you all, the speakers, for your insights. It was really important for us to be with us. René Souza, Karen, also Marta da Costa, Pepe Menendez, and also Stephen McCloskey. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and for being here with us. This is only a starting point. It's always a starting point for everything. Mm-hmm. So I will just pass the word for Sandra. And also I would like to thank you for all the participants that were here listening and also thinking about these important questions. Sandra?
Okay, thank you for your resilience and patience about Zoom problems. I want to thanks again the insights and mindful thoughts that Karen, Pepe, Stephen, Marta, and Renee share with us. Global citizenship education is a world that is challenging us, just as the world, of course. So it was a pleasure to be with you, and maybe in another opportunity is for sure in another conference or webinar, we are going to complete this starting points and reflection. And for sure, each one of us will be thinking about some of the key issues that we have been sharing here. So I make the invitation also, of course, to try to read some of the so interesting chapters that some of these authors and invited speakers have written in the book, and see you in another opportunity. Okay? Keep safe and see you in the next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Beijinhos. Abraços.
Obrigada.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.